This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the Middle East braces for possible war as President Trump threatens to strike Syria for the chemical attacks seen around the world. Plus, Israel Rising, a new book that shows prophecy in action and stunning before and after pictures. Plus, a preview of CBN's new documentary, To Life, that celebrates Israel's humanitarian work to the nations. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. U.S. President Donald Trump is weighing the best way to respond to Syria's use of chemical weapons against its own people. He's working to send a message to Bashar al-Assad while not escalating the situation into an all-out war. Jennifer Wishon is in Washington with more.
As images like these are viewed around the world, innocent people, including children, gasping for air, President Trump is working with his national security team to send a message to Syria and the rest of the world that the use of chemical weapons is unacceptable and can't go unpunished.
We'll see what happens, folks. We'll see what happens. It's too bad that the world puts us in a position like that.
Key American allies are ready to back the president's action. In London, Prime Minister Theresa May's cabinet held an emergency meeting where ministers agreed on the need to take action. Later, May spoke with Trump and the two agreed it was vital that the use of chemical weapons did not go unchallenged. French President Emmanuel Macron says his country has proof the Syrian government carried out the chemical attack, and he's also on board with possible military action. The big dilemma is how to respond.
It will probably be a short, quick, hard punch to the Assad regime, and that could be it. It all depends on how the Russians react and how the Syrians react in response.
It's a tremendously complicated situation militarily. Russian, Iranian, and Turkish forces are all operating in Syria, and American forces are also there, going after ISIS fighters. The U.S. doesn't want a military strike to widen into a bigger battle between the two sides, led by the U.S. and Russia.
We're trying to stop the murder of innocent people, but on a strategic level, it's how do we keep this from escalating out of control.
Russia is weighing its response in case America does lead an attack against its Syrian ally. A top Russian military official warned last month that a U.S. strike against Syria would draw a Russian counterstrike against both U.S. missiles and the ships launching them. And Thursday, Russia's ambassador to the UN didn't rule out the possibility of a U.S.-Russian conflict. Russia has moved its warships out of the Syrian port of Tartus to avoid a possible U.S. strike. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News, Washington.
America's UN ambassador Nikki Haley blasted Syria and Russia for the chemical attack.
Who does this? Only a monster does this. Only a monster targets civilians and then ensures that there are no ambulances to transfer the wounded, no hospitals to save their lives, no doctors or medicine to ease their pain. I could hold up pictures of all of this killing and suffering for the council to see. But what would be the point? The monster who is responsible for these attacks has no conscience. Not even to be shocked by pictures of dead children. The Russian regime, whose hands are all covered in the blood of Syrian children, cannot be ashamed by pictures of its victims. We've tried that before. We must not overlook Russia and Iran's roles in enabling the Assad regime's murderous destruction.
During Israel's National Remembrance of the Holocaust, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warned the Islamic Republic of Iran that Israel will not tolerate Iran's growing military presence inside Syria.
The nuclear agreement freed the Iranian regime from its bonds. Since then, it has been devouring one country after another, just like what happened in Europe in the 1930s. And I have a message to convey to the rulers of Iran. Do not put the determination of the state of Israel to the test. And I also have a message to the Iranian people. Israel is not your enemy. It is the tyrannical regime that oppresses you who is the enemy. And when this regime will disappear from the world, and it is bound to disappear ultimately, our two ancient peoples, the Jews and the Persians, will once again be able to collaborate and coexist.
Coming up, a new book shows in black and white and color pictures prophecy coming to life in Israel.
To me, it's one of the most profound miracles of our day.
Nearly 3,000 years ago, the Hebrew prophets wrote of how the land of Israel would be transformed. Now a new book shows those remarkable and even prophetic changes since the Jewish people have returned from around the world. 150 years ago, famed author Mark Twain visited the Holy Land and wrote, "It was a desolate country and a silent and mournful expanse."
He talks about up in the Jezreel Valley, he talks about how that you can travel in 10 miles in any direction and not see a single person. And so one of the towns that we did some photography was of a small town of Afula, which is really off the map as far as many Westerners are concerned, but it was established in the early 1900s. So 50, 60 years after Mark Twain, there's a small Jewish settlement. And today it's a booming Israeli city that we've been able to match some side-by-side perfect photography with it.
Doug Hershey and his team chose 200 photographs of Israel from the 1880s to the 1940s. In his new book, Israel Rising, The Land of Israel Reawakens, Hershey chronicles the changes from that time span until today.
That's been part of the joy. I mean, we have these old photos of Tel Aviv of less than 100 years ago of shacks on sand dunes with camel caravans on the beach, and to compare it from the exact same angle today, it's just stunning.
The book follows Ezekiel's promise, where in chapter 36, verse 8, the prophet declared, "But you, O mountains of Israel, you shall shoot forth your branches and yield your fruit to my people Israel, for they are about to come."
We think of prophecy being to kings or to people or nations, but he's prophesying to the land that when Israel returns as a nation, branches will put forth fruit, waste cities will be rebuilt, the people and beast will be multiplied on the land will be cultivated and sown.
These side-by-side photos show the transformations. Here's Jerusalem near the King David Hotel in the 1930s, and the same view today. This is the Hebrew University campus in 1925, and what it looks like now. From the north in Haifa to the south in Beersheba, Hershey says the pictures represent the prophet's words coming alive.
We're living in a really profound time in history. We're living in a time where 2,700-year-old prophecies from Isaiah and Ezekiel and Jeremiah, they've been lying dormant for about that long, and many of them are coming to pass. The most repeated promise through the scriptures is that God will bring his people back to the land, and when they do, there's going to be these dramatic changes, and we're seeing those.
Hershey says the land itself seemed to be waiting for its ancient people to return.
To me, it's one of the most profound things here, is this land has been conquered 15, 20 different times. It never becomes a homeland for any other people group, and the land would never produce for any other people group. And Israel moves back in, and suddenly the vast desert wastelands are now producing flowers, they're producing fruit. Isaiah 27 talks about how that when Israel returns, Jacob will take root and fill the earth with fruit. And for many centuries, believers would read that and look at that as allegorical or spiritual, and we're finding today it's very literal. It's happening right now.
Hershey says the book provides a visual opportunity for those who have never visited Israel, and it's also struck a chord with the younger generations.
But most millennials are ready for something real. They want to see something practical. It's as far as much of perhaps theological Christianity that they've been raised on, and more ideas. They're ready for something solid. They're ready for something real. And so even now when I speak in the States, sometimes I'll have questions about theology or the questions about the land, and usually my answer revolves around, let me show you. Come with me to Israel, I'll show you myself.
As Israel celebrates its 70th anniversary, Hershey sees Israel as a miracle.
Absolutely. I mean, Israel is the time clock, as many people have heard and have said, and I believe that as well. I mean, there's so much that is happening here in a very short amount of time. To me, it's one of the most profound miracles of our day.
Up next, see how one Israeli organization brought millions of Jews back to the Promised Land. The Jewish Agency. It's a simple name, but a powerful organization used to reestablish the State of Israel and bring the Jewish people back home. Take a look. Founded in 1929, the Jewish Agency predated the modern State of Israel by 19 years. Some say it's an organization created by God, using men to fulfill His purposes. Today, one of the main missions of the Jewish Agency is still to bring the Jewish people back to the land. And seeing Jewish people return is like watching Bible prophecy unfold. Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel all speak of the Jewish return to the land. Jewish Agency Chairman Natan Sharansky told new immigrants they had fulfilled the dream of generations.
Only think for a moment, each of you, about your fathers, your grandfathers, your great-grandfathers, all those generations of your families, of Jews who were dreaming and praying next year in Jerusalem. And you did it.
The Jewish Agency's mission? Inspire Jews worldwide to connect with their people, heritage, and homeland, and empower them to build a Jewish future and strong Israel. CBN's Gary Lane spoke with the current director of the Jewish Agency in our Virginia Beach studios.
Right. Alan, thank you for being with us. So where are most of the Jews coming from that are coming to Israel?
It's a pleasure to be here, first of all. And, you know, the Jewish Agency has brought 4 million Jews to Israel since the state was created. And in every period, there are different groups of Jews who need to be brought to Israel or who wish to be brought to Israel. So whereas in the early years of the state, we brought 120,000 Jews from Iraq and several 100,000 Jews from Morocco and many of the countries of North Africa. In the last 25 years, the Jewish Agency brought 1 million Jews from the former Soviet Union. And even today, close to 16,000 Jews come from Russia and from the Ukraine. More and more what we're seeing is young professionals who believe that there's no future under Mr. Putin, or who come from the eastern parts of the Ukraine where there's still fighting and conflict, also related to Russia. And so we have an ongoing stream of close to 15,000 Jews who come from Russia and from the Ukraine and from the former Soviet Union altogether. More recently, in the last 5 or 6 years, there's been a very strong stream of Jews coming from Europe, particularly from France, after a wave of anti-Semitic incidents, terrible terrorist attack in Toulouse at a Jewish school. The following year, 2015 and 2016, we saw close to 8,000 French Jews coming to Israel. That's 8,000 Jews out of a total population of 500,000. In 1 year, that's a very big percentage.
And there have been more attacks just recently in France. In Paris, just a little over a week ago, we saw an elderly woman who survived the Holocaust. I think she was 85 years old. She was brutally murdered.
Brutally murdered.
Yeah.
So I should say that after the Bataclan attack, which is almost 2 years ago on the nightclub in Paris, the French government responded by bringing army into Jewish institutions. And I think for about a year there was a sense of security, and the immigration went down a bit from 8,000 a year to about 6,000 a year. But one of the things that we're noticing, particularly in the last couple of weeks, and this is true about Europe in general, there's concern in Hungary, there's concern in France, there is concern of a new and very ugly wave of anti-Semitism sweeping Western Europe, and I think that we will see more Jews coming to Israel.
Well, what kind of stories are you hearing from those who do come to Israel?
We hear of Jewish children being taunted in public schools. There's a big push of families who would like to get places that don't exist in Jewish schools. And so families say, if this is what the future is going to look like, I don't think that this is what I'd like to see for my children. And we see many, many young people making a decision to leave. A large number of them decide to come to live in Israel.
So what do you do for them then, those that are coming from France, more coming from France now, also other places in Europe? What do you do for them when they come to Israel?
So I think one of the things that is a truism, and I think any of your viewers who was an immigrant will know, is that it's not just making the decision to migrate, it's the initial absorption that makes all the difference. And so the Jewish Agency for Israel has not only brought 4 million Jews to Israel, but we run a network of absorption centers through Israel. 17, we do this in cooperation with the government of Israel, where we offer immigrants a corridor in which they learn Hebrew, they're given coping skills. In some cases, let's say Ethiopian immigrants who have come from a third world country, we help them to acquire a trade or a profession. I'm not sure whether you know, I'm sure you remember, that the very first law on the books of the State of Israel was the law of return. Any Jew who says they want to come into the State of Israel has the absolute right to become a citizen. There's no country that has a law like that on the books, but it gives us, the state and the Jewish people, a great responsibility in terms of how to integrate those people.
Well, Alan Hoffman, we appreciate you taking the time today to talk to us a little more about this rising anti-Semitism in Europe and what you're trying to do for those who are coming to Israel.
So it's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I should say this is the week before the 70th birthday of the State of Israel, the 70th birthday of Israel's independence. And I think that one of the biggest assets for the State of Israel is the support of Christians around the world who believe in Israel and believe in the fulfillment of the biblical prophecy.
Okay, thank you, sir, from the Jewish Agency for joining us today.
Thank you.
God bless you.
Coming up, see how CBN is working to help the life of this Holocaust survivor when we come back. Each year on Holocaust Remembrance Day, Israelis stop and remember the 6 million Jews who died in the Holocaust. A siren sounds throughout the country, and for 2 minutes, cars and buses stop while people stand in silence to honor the memory of those who were killed by the Nazis. Thousands of Holocaust survivors live in Israel today, and many need help with their daily needs. And that's why CBN came to help Vladimir.
The year was 1941. Vladimir had just turned 14 when Nazis invaded Ukraine.
They came so quickly. Immediately, they rounded up Jews and shot them. My father kissed me goodbye, then he and some of the other Jewish men escaped into the forest to form a resistance.
Vladimir struggled to take care of his mother and brother in the newly formed ghetto, while his father made guerrilla raids on Nazi troops. In order to flush out the resistance, the Gestapo came up with a ruthless plan.
The Gestapo would slaughter all the women and children in the ghetto if the resistance fighters did not turn themselves in. My father gave himself up to save our lives. This I will never forget.
His father was executed just 9 days before Allied forces liberated the ghetto. After the war, Vladimir shared his story many times and has been acknowledged around the world. He moved to Jerusalem in 1989 and had a good life until one day he felt a sharp pain in his chest.
I had a heart attack and needed surgery. I have to take heart medication every day, but my insurance does not cover the full cost of it. It's very hard for me to come up with extra money.
Vladimir is a widower, and his 2 sons aren't able to help him financially, so CBN Israel covers the expense of his heart medication.
This medication means the difference between life and death for me, and I can't thank CBN Israel enough.
Vladimir was doing all of his laundry by hand, which was very tiring. So we got him a washing machine and installed it for him. We also take Vladimir food regularly and spend some time with him. He and our volunteers have become great friends.
It's very important for us to be remembered by you because many of us are alone. Thank you so much for your love and support. It means everything.
Many survivors of the Holocaust came straight from Europe to help build a Jewish state. Israel will celebrate its 70th anniversary on April 19th. To commemorate this landmark, CBN has produced a new documentary that honors how Israel and Israelis come to the aid of people in need.
Violent aftershocks rattle that region. We know that every minute is critical if we want to find survivors.
She already had damage to the lungs.
They just come with their clothes only.
It's breaking my heart. This makes the surgery even more difficult.
There is blood on our hands if we know and we walk away.
And I think that God wants me here because He wants me to help these people.
I can help refugees, so this is what I should be doing.
I think that's not only our privilege, but our duty.
No matter which religion he has, which color he is, what language he talks.
When people need us, we come and help.
The common language is that they're human beings.
We can't just sit back and watch what's going on.
This is how changes start.
I hope you can get a copy of To Life, and you may also enjoy the other documentaries CBN has produced, like In Our Hands, The Battle for Jerusalem, The Hope, The Rebirth of Israel, Made in Israel, and Whose Land Is It? You can check these out at cbn.com/special. That's all for this edition. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.